By the time the Tesla arrived, the bow was already sagging in the heat. Red ribbon, glossy hood, neighbors slowing down as if spectacle were a civic duty. My sister laughed the way people do when a camera is present, open, performative, practiced. My parents hovered near the driveway, hands clasped, smiling with the relief of having done something visible. I stood a little apart, holding a paper folder that felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a breakdown of my tuition balance, interest rates, due dates, a column labeled Remaining. $38,000. The font was neutral, the tone polite. It didn't accuse anyone. It simply existed. Later, inside, my mother pressed a glass of lemonade into my hand and said, "You understand, right? We had to prioritize." Prioritize was a word that had followed me since childhood. It meant expectations adjusted downward and explanations adjusted upward. It meant my sister's needs were urgent and mine were instructive. It meant if something went wrong for me, it was a lesson. If it went wrong for her, it was a problem to be solved. I nodded because nodding shortened conversations. That night, I added the balance to a spreadsheet I kept for myself: debts, income, projections. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no tears. Just a calculation. I would pay it. I would not ask again. The next few years unfolded in a way that looked ordinary from the outside. I worked through school. Then after, I chose jobs that built leverage rather than prestige. I said no to things I wanted because the numbers didn't work yet. I said yes to mentors who didn't flatter me. When I spoke to my parents, updates were exchanged like weather reports. My sister's life came with anecdotes, mine came with summaries. Distance settled in, not as estrangement but as logistics. Holidays shortened. Calls thinned. When my parents mentioned my work, it was often framed as surprising. "We didn't know you were doing all that," my father would say, as if my competence had appeared without rehearsal. The offer letter arrived on a Wednesday morning. The subject line was straightforward. I read it twice, then once more slowly, checking figures against what I already knew. It wasn't luck. It wasn't charity. It was a role I had been preparing for, and the compensation reflected that. The company's annual event was scheduled for that evening, a formality, I'd been told. Names, acknowledgments, a brief stage moment for the incoming class. I didn't invite my family. I didn't think to. When my mother texted that they were on town anyway, and asked if they could attend, I hesitated, then sent the details. The auditorium lights dimmed. The CFO stepped up with a stack of papers and a practiced calm. He spoke about growth, about alignment. Then he began reading names, schools, roles, figures. When he reached mine, there was a pause, not dramatic, just the time it takes to turn a page. He read the number cleanly, without emphasis. It landed in the room like a fact, which is what it was. I didn't look at my parents right away. I watched the way people shifted in their seats, recalibrating their assumptions. Then I felt my mother's hand tighten around my forearm. Not hard. Just enough to register. Afterward in the lobby, congratulations collected around me. My parents stood slightly behind, smiling in a way that didn't quite match the moment. My sister hugged me and said, "I had no idea," with a sincerity that surprised me. Neither of my parents mentioned the tuition bill. Not then. 2 weeks later, my father called with a request that arrived wrapped in nostalgia. The family business, small, regional, had been relying on a vendor relationship I managed through my work. A family discount had existed for years, informal and generous, but born from proximity rather than policy. "We were hoping," he said carefully, "that arrangement could continue." I asked for the details. He provided them. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was silence, the kind that invites reassurance. "I can't," I said. My voice didn't shake. "It's not appropriate anymore." There was a pause on the line, longer than comfortable. He started to argue, then stopped himself. He tried again, this time with humor, then with concern, then with a reminder of everything they had done for me. I waited until he was finished. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's correction." The discount ended the following month. The external consequence was immediate and measurable. Invoices changed, margins tightened. No one raised their voice. No one accused me of betrayal, at least not directly. The recalibration happened quietly, in emails and revised budgets. At dinner later that year, the conversation avoided specifics. My mother asked about my apartment. My father talked about the market. My sister mentioned charging stations. The tuition bill was never brought up, though I noticed my mother watching me as if expecting something: gratitude, perhaps, or absolution. I felt neither. What I felt was a steadying, a sense that the ledger I'd kept internally, effort versus recognition, obligation versus choice, was finally accurate, not balanced in the sentimental sense. Balanced in the way systems are when inputs and outputs align. The favoritism didn't evaporate. It never does. It softened at the edges, reshaped by new information. My parents began to ask before assuming. My sister stopped explaining her successes as accidents. The family didn't become fair. It became more precise. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the driveway and the red bow and the folder in my hands. I don't resent it anymore. It was data. It taught me how to read a room, how to price my work, how to refuse without cruelty. Self-worth, I learned, isn't reclaimed with speeches. It's reclaimed with decisions that hold, even when no one is watching.